the outside of Westfield. So that's where I went to college with my class. And off campus Saturday.
Members of the public, do you want to sit at the table over there so that you can see our candidate's face while he's talking?
Like, I'm okay with that if you're.
Oh,
okay with that.
absolutely.
Yeah, no, the side right, the side right, just
Yeah.
like,
Join us.
Should we become part of your committee?
Should we put a little sign that says audience? The guy's gonna walk in.
Just a big committee.
There's nothing wrong with that.
All right.
Yep.
we're good.
What are these permanent cameras, Chris?
Huh?
Are these permanent cameras?
No, it's all Tyler's stuff. This is my little camera right here.
Ah. Do you want to ask me or do you need to wait until later?
Someone else applied for that job that I'm the math job.
Well, I think it might have been,
Sorry about that.
All right, well,
I'm not sure about that.
I was just letting you know.
Actually, Cheryl let me know that as well, because she has space. She's special.
It's upsettled and we'll start.
welcome. We're delighted that you are with us. We'll begin by having members of the interview committee introduce themselves.
I'm Amy Gatto, I'm the house Gary, school committee member for Sin. I have two district, one of them is coming here next year. And I also have in the past been a high school teacher.
My name is Carol, and I am the vice chair of the.
Hi, I'm Karen Browning. I'm the interview committee coordinator, special ed here.
Hi, how are you? I'm Lauren Clary. I teach at one of the elementary schools, and I also have two children that will be attending my meeting.
Dan, we have some prepared questions, and as I said to you during our initial interview, were you to come back as a finalist, which you have, there's more opportunity for back and forth in the conversation. So I invite members of the interview committee to feel even more free about follow-up questions, and we'll leave time at the end for some back and forth. Okay, you ready? All right, go ahead.
I welcome back. Describe what a typical day in school would look like for you.
It's hard to describe a typical day because one of the reasons I like the job is there's not typical days. Every day is a little bit different, but generally, in broad strokes, I get in the morning, get organized, get settled, go at night, things to do that day. Might be appointments or meetings or an IEP meeting or a parent coming in. Then I make a to-do list of activities I'd like to get done that day, sort of to keep me on track. But what generally happens is the list I make is just a best intentions list because the job is you do a lot. And it's very, not reactive, but you have to be responsive to what's going on in the day. So after I get settled, I'll check email, have my coffee, sort of ease into the day, and then I greet the students as they're coming in the building and doing the bus drop-off or the car line, depending on the school's setup. Where I work now, I do the bus drop-off line, and other jobs I've done car drop-off, depending on what the structure is. But I'd like to say hi to the kids when they come in, get a sense of the day. You can sort of pick up on the vibe of the school in general. You can pick up on certain things from kids. If a student who's always smiling in the morning is coming in a little more downtrodden, you might set off a bell. You want to check in with them or tell the teacher that something's going on. Also a nice time to say hi to the teachers so they come in and say hi to parents. After that, we'll do morning announcements usually and get settled into the day. Usually during the first half hour, the hour of the day, time for me to catch up on a few things. Students are settling into the day, talking to the people I work with in the office, just getting my agenda set. I will then spend a lot of time in the day visiting classrooms as often as possible, sometimes doing formal observations, sometimes just being a presence so the students know I'm around and the teachers know I'm around. I always do lunch duty. That's an important part of my day in any job I've had. Even as a principal, I did that. Currently in the school I'm in now, we have 4 lunches, so it's about 2 hours of my day. So so it's a big time commitment, but I think it's important, because it's a chance for me to see the students in sort of their natural environment, and a chance for the students to see me in a non-academic setting. It also supports the teachers who have to have lunch duty, which a lot of teachers is not the favorite part of their day. But I like it. You find a way to make it positive. You get to see kids, you can sit down and have lunch, you can talk to kids. It's a nice, low-key way to sort of make connections with people, both the people you work with and the students you're working for. After lunch, I generally will have a quick bite myself if I haven't eaten during lunch duty, so depending what the lunch is that day. Sometimes I'll have a piece of pizza and stand up while I eat it, or sit down with some kids. And then the afternoon is spent doing more classroom work, or maybe some quiet work in the office for about 20 minutes. There seems to be some lulls in the day, right after the morning announcements, and then right after lunch when I can do some more quiet reflection and some quiet work in the office. But generally, a lot of the paperwork stuff has to happen after the day, or before when the students aren't there. Because you need to be very responsive to those times. And I mentioned that list I make in the morning. I make it to keep myself on target and know what I have to try to get done if I have a moment. But you really can't stick to that because it's not realistic. You have to be able to react to things and be out there. Things always come up, whether it be a student having a tough time, a teacher having a sick family member. This last few years, I've done a lot of subbing, which was never on my list to do in the morning. But someone went home sick, their kid got sick, I'm going to jump in the library and sub. I like that because it's a way to always keep my feet in the teacher camp, because I was a teacher for 10 years before I got into administration, and you can easily forget what it's like out there, especially in the last 2 or 3 years. Things have changed so much that it was very helpful for me to be in the library or in a classroom on those days to see how things had changed and what the new challenges were. After the kids leave, I'll say goodbye. Oftentimes we'll have after-school meetings, whether it be school improvement council or different committees that you might head up. And then you sort of do your paperwork and head out, bring your briefcase home and get ready to do it the next day. But I like this profession that's not a typical day. I have a brother who works in business, and his day is pretty much, every day is almost the same. He has this meeting with this direct report, then he has a meeting with his boss, and then he has to do this spreadsheet, and it sounds dull, and this is anything but dull, which is why I've always been drawn to education. So.
How do you define educational equity? And tell us about equity-focused work you have led.
Okay, I think educational equity really refers to making sure everyone feels they belong in their school and their community, that they see themselves in their school and that the school sees them, their true selves. It can be as simple as making sure the curriculum materials you're providing reflect your community and reflect all members of the community. If you look at a simpler version, at elementary school kids in circle time when I was an elementary principal, are the books that they're reading reflecting their lives? Is it all one sort of narrative, or are they seeing pictures of themselves in those books? Are they seeing stories that remind them of their background at home? As you get older, the older grades, 7 to 12 that we're talking about now, it involves more, make sure the curriculum really reflects students' experiences and also prepares them for the future. Now, in a lot of the communities I've worked in, socioeconomic diversity seems to be more on the forefront than, let's say, racial diversity or religious diversity, but that also comes into play. I think it's ability to see yourself and to see outside of yourself to realize your experiences aren't the same as everyone else's. Some specific work we've done on that. Currently, I'm a member of a responsive leadership, culturally responsive leadership practices academy. We love to use letters in education, and then you forget what the letters mean. So we were involved in that all last year and the year before. It's run by a gentleman who graduated from Harvard. He's a doctor, former math teacher in the Boston Public Schools. It's called Blackprint, the organization. And we did a lot of work to educate ourselves, and I was a history major and a history teacher, so I've always felt I was very educated on the issues of the day and our history and realistic, looking at our history realistically. But this really opened my eyes in a lot of ways, and some of the spots that were blind spots to me as an individual and as an educator. So what we've been doing is going through and looking at our curriculum materials, starting in the younger grades, which led me to that example about the circle time, and then moving up to the older grades to make sure our novels in our English classes represent all students. A lot of classic novels are that good, they stood the test of time. There's a lot of other stories out there that are just as good that might give students a different perspective, and it might give a student who hasn't really seen themselves in the curriculum a connection. You look at a simple example, there was a Disney movie that came out last year called Encanto. And there was a lot of buzz on the internet because it was about a Colombian family and it was non-traditional storytelling. And a lot of students were seeing themselves in that film. And there was some great shots on the internet.
Describe the most effective professional development in which you have participated, and how have you used that experience to improve the PD that you lead or supervise?
Would I be talking about one that I've led, a powerful one?
I would say one in which you were a participant.
Okay. They're going to go hand in hand. So, remember being two experiences I had as a teacher. I was a social studies teacher for 10 years. One was learning about a thing called backward design, understanding by design, where you get your goal of where you want your lessons to get to. This is the information I want my students to have, and then you go backwards, and how are you going to get there? And I learned that, I think, my second or third year of teaching, and it was powerful because I was always great at coming up with exciting lessons and hooks and things to get the kids into the subject I was teaching. But my first few years, it was just that. It wasn't very purposeful. It was, this is a really cool idea, the kid's gonna like this, and this is a great movie clip, or this is a great dive. It wasn't very purposeful. It was, this is a really cool idea, the kid's gonna like this, and this is a great movie clip, or this is a great diary excerpt of a Civil War soldier. We'll read all these things, and then we'll have a test. Once I was introduced to understanding by design, it made everything more purposeful. I could see, is this lesson, although it's high interest, steps I'm thinking about going to get me there? Whether that be a conversation with my mom, that I want her to do something differently with her finances or with the way she's running her life, because she's been retired for a while now and is loving life, but sometimes she needs a little guiding hand from my brother and I. Be like, spend a little too much money now and having vacations, you need to tighten it up. But we always end the conversation with what's our goal? Make sure mom's happy, make sure she has enough money to get through the rest of her long life. So another thing that was very important I learned similar to that was learning objectives. It's a thing that Robert Marzano came out years ago, and similar to that, but on a daily scale, I do this, or I've learned this, or can do this task. And I introduced that when I was the principal of Wolverhampton Middle School. We brought that in. This was in 2010. And so learning objectives have really taken hold now, that they weren't part of our everyday teaching in those days. So I had used it as a teacher and had introduced it through professional development. But so was just giving examples of learning objectives or lesson objectives. Then we would do some working groups where we would people would bring lessons to the table, and the group would help them come up with some objectives. Once again, just putting your end goal in mind and making sure all parts of that unit or lesson bring you to that. At the end of this, the students can do this. We then started to roll it out a little more robustly, and by the end of the year, all the teachers, as part of their daily routine, they should have it on the board, and the students should be part of the lesson, not just written up there, but referred to. Okay, guys, remember I said at the beginning that at the end of this, we're all going to have to do coordinate planes? Well, this is where the rubber hits the road in that. I found as a teacher, it kept me focused and on task, because I like to talk, and I love history, so I would get sometimes off task. And if they asked me an exciting question, I would get a little off. That kept me focused. As the students found it very helpful that they knew where we were going, and the less it was transparent, there was no mystery, it was very clear where we were all going together. And as an administrator, I find it incredibly helpful because I can pop into a classroom for 10 or 15 minutes and I don't have to ask a lot of questions. I know what the topic is, I know what they're shooting for, and I can get a real quick dipstick test on are they working to getting towards that goal, how far they are to getting to the end of that learning objective. So I also had the opportunity to present my work and learning objectives at the Massachusetts Secondary School Administrators Association summer conference a few years back. That was great. I unfortunately got the last slot of the conference, and most people had gone to the beach by that point, but the people who were there got a good lesson, so it was very fun.
Okay. Please tell us about an idea that you had to improve student learning or teacher instruction that you brought from idea to implementation including challenges that you encountered in the process?
Okay. I can think of a lot of those because what we do in this business is improve instruction and bring in new programming and always looking to sharpen that saw and make sure we're doing the right things for the kids. But a recent example would be when I first came to Ware Junior Senior High School 3 years ago. We had a high school study skills course for our students and IEPs who struggled with some learning. And it was a class designed to give them study skills, help them with executive functioning, staying organized, help them learn how to study for a test, how to take notes, how to write a paper, just basic study skills, as the course is called, and strategies for success. The issue was we didn't have that in the 7th and 8th grade, and I have a strong middle school background, and the schools I work in always had these programs. And it was an important part of the student's day to teach student skills, to teach those skills, because we often work on our subject matter. I'm going to teach science, I'm going to teach history, I'm going to teach English. But it often falls through the cracks, some of these student skills, these softer skills, how to keep an agenda and know what you have for homework, how to access the online portal and see what your grades are, how to approach a teacher when you have a question, how to properly study for a test that's not cramming the night before, how do you manage your time. So we, myself and 7th grade special ed teacher at the time, Lynn Grudy, had this idea. She had wanted to do a class like that in the junior high for years. I had a lot of experience with these programs being successful. So we put our heads together and started to come up with some proposals of what this would look like. When would it happen? How long? How would students get involved? How would it feed into the high school program? And how would we get students into it in 7th grade? We got to such a point that it was really fleshed out. We brought the special ed director into our meetings, and she was very enthusiastic about it as well. We really then had the approval we needed because our plans were very clear. This was the outcome. This is how it was going to help kids. This is what it was going to look like. So when we brought it to the special ed director, it was fleshed out. And he made a few suggestions. Let's try this. Let's try that. And then we implemented it. And it's been in its 3rd year now. We started in my 1st year, and it's now become part of the culture of that school. That it's not just we're giving it to the kids in 9th grade, we're giving them those roadmap to success a lot earlier. So now students in the 6th grade, before they enter, that's part of their planning meeting, their transition meeting to the junior, senior high school. Is this something that would help them on their plan? Should we add it in? And it also, in their transition meeting from high school, if they've been successful in that, we're going to put this study skills course in their schedule. I've seen a lot of different ways you balance a study skills course or an academic support course. We had the option to take them out of another class for part of the year. So we had a computer skills class we brought in that was teaching coding. Wonderful class, great skills. But at that point in the year, we thought the students could opt in to take the academic support class instead of the coding, so they could really shore up their student skills in things they were struggling with before they added on what's basically a whole second language. And that's been successful. I've seen programs where we've taken kids out of different classes for part of the year. We had to take one student out of civics this year for part of the year because the schedule didn't work. But if you go, once again, with your end goal in mind, giving students the skills they need to be successful, you'll find a way to make it work. So that was a successful program we brought forward that I'm very proud of.
Could you please describe a mistake you have made and how you addressed it?
Okay. It's always tough to be reflective like this because you're trying to put your best foot forward. I do make mistakes. I'm just trying to think of one that could be the clearest example. I gave one from years ago. I was a new assistant principal at Quabog Regional. Had come from a large middle school, over 1,000 kids, 6, 7, and 8, and I was in charge of 6th grade that year. So my first year as an administrator was in charge of 6th grade. So I had a lot of students. I had over 300 students that I was in charge of, and dealt with their daily issues of misbehavior, stumbling, and making poor choices, and was good at that, and knew to cooperate with the other assistant principals, with the principal, and build those relationships with the parents. When I moved out to Western Mass after we had my daughter, I got a job at Quabog Regional Middle High School, which goes up to 12th grade. I was exposed at that point to behavior issues I had not seen before. For example, in my interview, they asked me what I knew about expulsion and suspension law. And I'm like, well, I learned about it in class, but we didn't apply it a lot in the current job I was in. The behaviors did not rise to that level. I remember the specific question, I had to say, I don't know what that is. It was 37 H and a half. It's a suspension law. Lo and behold, I used that all the time when I was there, but I was very honest. I said, I don't know what that is, but if it's necessary, I'll find out. And I learned it very quickly how to apply that. They've added to that law since. But my mistake or my error in those days was I was coming from a different environment, sixth grade students who were more innocent and less worldly than some of our high school kids were experiencing the things they were bringing to the table. So I was a little too trusting. So we had a situation where a senior who had an internship in the 7th grade gym class lost his cool and struck a 7th grader as the intern, which was very upsetting for everyone involved. So I brought the student in. He was very upset. He got emotional, apologized, owned up to it, said he lost his cool. The kid had been mean to his sister, and he just reacted in a way that wasn't appropriate for school and definitely not becoming of a student wanting to be an educator in their future. So we went through the handbook, gave out the consequences. I supported the student through this difficult time because they were very upset. They had high standards for themselves. They were a good student, good athlete, just all around great person who stumbled. But when you stumble, there are learning consequences. So I applied the consequences, and we ended it, and his parents came in and picked him up. Lo and behold, the next day, parents came in with the child, and both parents, and recanted everything the child had told me of what happened, and had a completely different version of the agreed upon order of events that everyone in the gym class had seen, the student had readily admitted to, the gym teacher had seen, and that was a completely different version of events. Because the parents were concerned that that box on his college applications, have you ever been suspended, they would have to click that box. I get that, but the truth is the truth, and your choices are your choices, and you have to live with the consequences, and these were appropriate consequences. Long story short, it went over my head to the principal, who supported me, then it went over both their heads to the superintendent, who overturned the suspension. What I learned from that is twofold. Get everything in writing, one, because you want to make sure that people keep their facts straight, but also in some of these complicated cases, when students are bullying each other, or there's a social conflict, there's a lot of different versions of these events. If you can get it all written down by the student, it can help you keep your facts straight. It's also a helpful tool if a student is upset, that they can write their thoughts down first before they talk to you. It helps you to keep the facts straight. It also has a record if someone wants to really change their story. But it was also a powerful lesson that I don't have control over every situation. That I did my job, I did my due diligence. At the end of the day, the decision was overturned, and I just had to let it ride. So twofold, keep good records, be open and honest about your decision-making and why you did it, and then if it does not go your way because something out of your control, you have to move on. So that was a mistake I made and what I learned from it, and I've used it going forward.
So, what approaches do you find most helpful when seeking to engage students in grades 7 through 12?
A lot of the approaches that I use just in my personal life, just to interact with the people I meet throughout my life and throughout my career, apply to students. I think people think you need to have, I learned this when I was an elementary assistant principal and principal for 2 years in Palmer, and I had never worked with such young students. So I thought I had to do everything really differently at first. Like I had to be like a Mr. Rogers, and I had to and it didn't work. I just found out very quickly that be yourself, be the person you are, and be genuine and be caring, and the kids are going to pick up on that even if they were younger. So I found once I stopped trying to be Mr. Rogers, just became Dan, I had a lot more success. What that means though, in the day-to-day interactions with students and teachers, that you want to ask kids questions. How are they doing? How was your weekend? You're going to get a lot of this, but eventually the kids will realize that you're going to keep asking, and they're going to have an answer for you. It might be a wise guy answer, like I did nothing. Or, oh, did you see that? Or I have high school age daughter and a junior high age son. So I know what kids do when they talk about it. And so I have a lot of cultural references that did you see Stranger Things last week? Or did you watch this? Or the new Taylor Swift album came out and did you listen to that? So not trying to be cool, but just knowing what's part of their everyday life and what they might want to talk about. It's also helpful that you can talk about things that are going on in school. Sports, clubs that they're in. How is the school play? How's rehearsal going? Or, You have regionals coming up. How do you feel about that? Just making small talk. And those times, like I said, in the morning, when they're getting off the bus, or out of the cars, in the lunchroom, when they're leaving the building, because you don't want to interrupt class and make small talk. We want to find those little moments we can capture and have those conversations. And I think students pick up on the fact that if you're genuine and you're caring, and what you are is what you are. Like, you're not putting on a display. Kids see right through that. I remember as a teacher, kids would see right through anything I did that wasn't 100% genuine. If I was trying hard to be strict that day, but it wasn't part of my personality. I struggled with that to find my style the first 2 years. How to keep the students, a bunch of 8th graders my first year, listening to my social studies lessons without getting completely out of control. When 5 years ago, I was like in a classroom myself because I was young. But you sort of develop your style, and it wasn't yelling, it wasn't shouting, wasn't being overly strict. It was knowing what's important, knowing when to really push the fact you were in charge, and when to know when to let things go and be a little more flexible. So kids picked up on that, my struggles. They picked up that like it was like a shark smelling blood, and the behavior went worse. Once I started to be genuine and really be myself, the behavior got better. So that was a powerful lesson, just to be yourself and find those moments where you can make small talk with kids and listen to what they're saying. It's also helpful on the other end of the spectrum that if the student I mentioned earlier you're seeing every day usually comes in with a smile or is very friendly and outgoing and is different that day, it sets off a little red flag. You may want to check with them later, let the homeroom teacher know. I've also had that work the opposite way. Students who are generally kind of have a face like mine when they don't smile, very serious and very mean, which is good for lunch to be, for life. And then you see them with a big smile one day, maybe something cool happened and you can ask them. So I let students know about me appropriately, like my daughter's your age, she loves that too, or yeah, my son tried that, he didn't like it, but maybe you can try this. I'm a musician, so that's become a topic of conversation for kids. I bring my instruments sometimes to play when appropriate. In the elementary school, I did that for kindergarten classes. And in the high schools and junior highs I've worked in, we had staff bands. I used to write a graduation song for 8th grade. But just bringing enough of yourself so you seem like a real person and connect with them as a person.
I actually have a follow-up question on that before I go to my question. So on the same topic of engaging grades 7 through 12, how do you see, what would you like to do with your building? So aside from just yourself with how you're engaging with kids from 7 through 12, but you know, it's important that I feel that the students, they may feel comfortable with you, but how do you see you incorporating that building-wide with staff and students? Are there things like in a perfect world, or how, you know, what's important to you to have that done?
I think people want to be happy with where they work. That comes from many forms, feeling appreciated, feeling valued. I mean, one of the phrases in the candidate search profile was treating people or viewing them as professionals. And that really resonated with me because we've all been in that situation where we weren't treated like a professional or our expertise wasn't acknowledged or wasn't respected. So that really resonated because I assume everyone is here to do a good job. So everyone wakes up wanting to be the best teacher they can. And if you make that, and you go on those grounds that everyone wants to come here and do the best job, that takes one thing off the table. You're assuming everyone's good intentions. Now, sometimes people have tough days or a tough year, and then you're there to support them. But if your general sense is that everyone here is professional and wants to do a good job, that takes a lot of this sort of feeling that sometimes administrators have this gotcha mentality. And I worked in buildings where I thought it was a gotcha. Like that one day my car broke down and I'm late, they're gonna be waiting in my classroom. That's not fun. That's not, you don't want to be caught on your worst day, wanting to see your best moments. So by treating people professionally, respectfully, as professionals, I think that builds trust. You also want to bring in things like we do for the kids that make it a fun place to work beyond the classroom. We used to have a thing on first Friday of every month. We'd all wear jeans and raise money for a charity. And we'd have a buffet in the morning that departments would take turns bringing in food. We did this at North Denver Middle School while I was a teacher, and then I brought it to Wilbraham Middle School. And at first, people were a little hesitant. You want me to come in early to do what? So the office staff put on the first breakfast, the first Friday of the month. We had a big coffee pot, and everyone brought in some munchies. Said, you don't have to get it early, but if you want to come in 10, 15 minutes early for a nice hot breakfast, come join us. And we started to get some momentum. And through the years we did that, it was a fairly large school. It was 600 students, and we had just brought in the second year I was there, we brought in 200 more 6th graders and about 30 more teachers. So it was a great way for everyone to get to know each other. Because in a team structure in middle school, you're really close with the 4 teachers you work with. Doesn't mean you know all the other teachers in the building. So this was a way for people to get to meet the other teachers in the building. The new 6th grade teachers especially, to get them to become part of our culture. I like to do things like trivia contests on Fridays. Every Friday, I would do a trivia question for the students and staff, do it over the loudspeaker. There was a little drop box for your slip, and I'd pull out a raffle, and the kid would get a gift card, and the teacher would get a Dunkin' Donuts gift card. Just a common thing to talk about. How'd you get the question today? People are like, aren't you worried people are going to cheat? I'm like, I'm not worried about that. Because if they took the time to look at it on their phone, at least they wanted to get involved. So it was fun. We do things like that. Same reason we give kids things they want to like about school besides the classroom stuff. We need to do that to staff too. Encouraging staff to get involved in some of the spirit days that the students do. We did a fun thing in Palmer. We did a thing called High Five Friday. We'd all be out there giving kids high fives in the morning. Some of the kids thought it was the stupidest thing ever. Some of the kids loved it. They want to overdo things like that and it becomes hokey and boring, but keep it fresh. Like every once in a while, do something like that. Give people a reason to like their job beyond just the experiences they have with their kids in the classroom. You want to get a sense of community. And I think one of the nice things about having a smaller school is it's a little easier to do that because if you have a social gathering like we talked about earlier with the breakfast, people are going to talk to each other. It's not 70 people in the library really crowded. It's you can get to know each other. I've also done things where I've had people observe people out of their subject. Just like I'll come, like if we had a sub with a free period or I had a free moment, why don't you go check out the cool things going on in the STEM class and I'll cover your English class ahead of time. It not only gives you a chance to see what other people are doing and get some cool ideas, I think it builds mutual respect among the departments and the teachers. So it takes work, but I think people want to come to work and be happy and feel like they belong and feel like they're a member of a team and a family. And I think if you look at it that way, you're going to get results instead of just looking at people as data points. So I'm a very people person. I use data when it's effective and when it's necessary, but it's not the lens I look at the world through.
I think a lot of what you just said does answer number 7, but I'll read it anyway in case there's anything else you want to add. Describe how you have built staff and community relationships in your current position and how you evaluated whether your relationship building was successful. Maybe you can talk more about, outside of the school.
We've had different things through the years. We've had staff-student basketball games I've organized. That was fun. I like when teachers have a sense of community that if there's an evening event that gets over, teachers have this natural inclination to maybe hang out afterwards. Now, it's not sanctioned by the school, of course, but I'm thinking of this basketball game. We all went out afterwards to an Italian restaurant, had pizza and a few drinks. And it was just fun. We got crushed in the game, but it was nice to see people outside of school and to see them as people and remind them like this is a person with a family and all these other things in their life that they bring to the table, but they're spending their days here giving their all and just see them as people. So that staff-student games are probably best staff-student soccer game. I'm awful at sports, but I play because I think it's fun for the kids to see you do things you're not good at. To see you take that risk, not be afraid of looking foolish, because that's how you get out of your comfort zone. I'm very self-effacing. I think people who know me get to realize that. And I think that's a benefit because if you take yourself too seriously, it doesn't work. Life is too short. This is too fun a job. When you get to work with kids and all the energy they bring to the table and all like those nice interactions you have every day to lose sight of that it's fun. It's hard, but it's fun. So how do I tell if things are successful? I would say when people are coming to the breakfast, the first breakfast we had, let's say we had 50 people, the people who get there early and just wanted free coffee. 2 months later, we had people who were the late people, who were like the right before the bell people getting there to get free coffee. And I'll make all the free coffee in the world, but this collegiality. I like to have teacher appreciation events in the building. The year during COVID, we couldn't do that, so my boss and I made a movie. We made a video, almost like Tom Cruise, Risky Business. I think his parents go out of town, and he has this big party, and they have that great Bob Seger song, and he slides into the room. So we did things like that all over the school, and basically ended up, we miss you so much. We miss the kids so much. We made a joke that we were having the time of our lives. And meanwhile, it was miserable. Like, we didn't have computers yet. We didn't have a one-to-one district. We got that through grants. So my boss and I are basically making photocopies every day and putting things out in a file cabinet for kids to pick up, or in some cases, driving work to kids' houses. Because the infrastructure wasn't there yet. There's been a lot of things that came out of the pandemic, and some of the positives where a lot of districts got more money for technology and can be more closer to one-on-one or one-to-one districts. So you need to look at the positive, this grant money. But back to my original point, seeing people increase their attendance at these events, or at the basketball game, seeing teachers who weren't friendly with each other before, wanted to go out afterwards and continue having a few laughs after the game. So things like that. It's anecdotal data, but it works. It's almost like when you look at an advisory program, when kids are talking to teachers, or you teach them a good relationship with their students. You're not going to get as many data points like, well, this is going up this much. But if you see that teacher who usually teaches behind the desk or up at the board the whole time, sitting at a student desk and just chatting, you can tell it's been successful. Moving people out of their usual routine and breaking them into something that's new for them. So you have to look for those soft data points too.
Sorry, I'm that person. I have another follow-up question.
That person.
Yeah, I'm that person. In our initial interview, you talked a little bit about, as staff, looking at students and how many times people have connected with students and sort of. Can you talk a little bit about that, like making those kind of relationships and connections with kids, and how that goes on?
I've done this several ways, trying to make sure kids don't fall through the cracks. Because we've all read stories about this or have lived through it. There's students who kids get noticed several ways. They can be all-star students with super polite manners and raise their hand all the time, or they can be the kid who's looking for negative attention and are doing things that are going to get your attention that way. Both those kids are on our radar, and we're going to address their needs in different ways. The students I worry about are those more quiet, reserved kids, more introverted kids, who aren't going to act up, but not necessarily making those connections with the adults or getting the learning done. They're sort of, for lack of a better word, easily be invisible. You want to make sure that that doesn't happen, because we all get caught up in a kid who's raising his hand every 5 minutes, making sure they're learning as much as they should be, and that they're challenged, and the kid shooting spitballs is going to get our attention as well. So we would do different protocols. In one of the middle schools I worked in, we had taken a visit to an Ellington school in Connecticut, and they had a protocol called Hands Up. And they would go through their class list, and if anyone had a comment or a concern, either good, bad, or indifferent, they would raise their hand and say, yeah, Timmy did really bad in his last science test. It's the third one in a row. Have you seen a similar pattern? And if the other teachers were seeing a pattern, they would reach out on more of a team basis instead of just calling about the test grades. Maybe there's something bigger going on, a big drop off in grades. It could be good news. I heard Sally is in the school play next month at her church, and let's make sure we mention that when we see her. She's really excited about that. That's an informal way to sort of make sure no one falls through the cracks. A more formal way is, I've done this in schools, where you get a card for every kid. A lot of times this is to a data wall, where you're tracking student scores. So we had our DIBEL scores, our reading test scores on these cards, and we were tracking them that way. But we had a great idea. We had all the cards on the wall. Let's do our staff meeting, and everyone who knows that kid well does their initials. So if you see kids with 6 initials, that kid has a lot of adult connections. They're really connected. If you see a kid with 1 or none, somehow we're not connecting with that kid. And it was funny, some of the kids that I knew and I gave check marks to were kids that maybe hadn't connected with other teachers because they were kids who struggled and were in my office a lot. But in that out of classroom experience, when they're not showing off to their friends, we had connected as people. I've noticed you get a huge difference in behavior when you get kids away from the audience. No kid wants to look foolish in front of their friends unintentionally, or they may want to compensate for not understanding the lesson by acting out. But when you get them away from that audience, things get real, and you can see what's really going on. So any student who doesn't have a check mark or initials, whatever you use, the student you need to reach out to and find a way to connect with them. You might need to use some sort of excuse, like so they don't embarrass. Oh, I noticed you had no check marks yesterday. But maybe have a club, or maybe have like a random selection of kids from your homeroom to help with something. I used to do a lot of random selections as a teacher. Like I had popsicle sticks, and the kids couldn't see the name. So if I knew this kid hadn't answered a question in like 3 weeks, I would cheat the popsicle stick. Oh, Timmy! And meanwhile, it wasn't. Just you need to sometimes judge the system a little bit to get the results. those are helpful. You hope in a great world that every kid's gonna have those adult connections or have someone who knows them, but there's a lot of kids, there's a lot less of us. Sometimes you have to really make sure you're actively making sure you connect with these kids. Okay.
What are the specific structures and attributes needed in school in order for adults to meet the needs of all students?
One of the things you need is we mentioned this earlier, you need to know. What are your goals? What do you want your school to look like? And one of the things that was attractive about this district and this school was not only the clarity that you had in the candidate profile, but when you dig a little deeper on the website, there are specific expectations and I'm trying to think of the word, core values and expectations that are clearly enumerated in that triangle. These are the skills we want kids to have to be successful adults and successful students. So you have your goal and you just go backwards from that. So what kind of schedule do we need to get us to that goal, to drive our learning to that? I've seen schools that use block scheduling, that they do a whole year's learning in half a year because the classes are double length. There's good and bad to that. I've seen schools who do more traditional. You have a class all through the year and you're balancing more classes. And there's good and bad to that. What you want to ask yourself is, why do we have that schedule? Is it going to get us where we need to go? Sometimes the schedule is dictated by things you don't want it to be dictated by. Staffing shortages, situations where we have an outlier class like band or chorus that is so important to your schedule, but it can sort of be that you have to schedule that first. You have to schedule around things. Sometimes it's been act support that we had to schedule around. But if it's that important and that's your first block on the schedule, that's how you plan it around. Because you know, band is an important skill for not only academic benefits, but for social benefits. My daughter was in the band in junior high, and she met like so many of her good friends that got her through the pandemic, and she had made such close connections in the band class. Wasn't the best clarinet player, but she will admit that. But the connection she made with that teacher and those kids really got her through the pandemic. She was home that year with just the connection she had made in band and the online lessons they were still doing. So you want to make sure that everything you're doing has a purpose. And if you have to do something that's going to tie your hands, for lack of a better word, schedule-wise, make sure is that important to your mission. It's not something that has always been done that way. I think you want to have a reflective practice when you lead a school and when you're working with groups to lead the school. I like to have teacher leadership, whether it be a principal's advisory committee, school improvement committee, or just, we had a really cool committee in Wilbraham one year called Best Practices. And it was teachers came after school when we met to talk about some of our favorite things. And we made a binder at the end of the year called Best Practices, and we shared it with the staff. We got a really good response to that because it wasn't paid, but who wouldn't want to share their best idea? It was like a brag session, like this really worked really well. And people were sometimes hesitant to share their best ideas, but we got to this trust level where it was learning from each other. So, and we were reflecting on what worked for us and then using that same philosophy, what's going to work for the school. So I don't think you want to make decisions about the structures in isolation. And ultimately, the principal and the administrators in the district have to make these decisions. You want to make sure you get input from the people who are living them every day. So if I made a schedule shift when we brought the 200 more kids to Wilbraham Middle School, I knew I had worked in large middle schools before, and I knew what worked in my previous middle schools, but I need to know what worked for them. So I brought my ideas to the table, but then I had all the other teachers from the schedule committee give me their ideas, so we could see what would work for them. So we had a marriage of the two ideas. This is an idea I'm bringing from North Andover. This is your history. Let's find that puzzle piece that's going to work with this school. So then you want to make sure you have enough feedback from the stakeholders, whether it be parents or teachers, or the older grades, students. I'm going to make sure that your decisions are getting to your ultimate goal. So as far as structures, opportunities for people to share their thoughts with administration, opportunities for people to share their ideas with each other, and then to administration. And the attributes are, you want to make sure it's student focused, that you want to make sure your decisions are based on what's the best needs for the kids. And in this particular situation, how do we get to those lifelong skills that have been outlined in our district documents? So a lot of schools don't have that, and they're sort of driving the line. So.
Thank you so much. Question number 9. As principal of PBRS, what role would you take in ensuring that our district improve its vertical alignment pre-K through 12? And when answering, please describe specific strategies you would undertake to help us reach this goal.
One of the benefits also of having a somewhat smaller district is if you're going to do a vertical articulation of the curriculum and the outcomes and the expectations for year to year, it's a smaller group. I use an example in my previous interview, I believe. I was a department head in North Danville Middle School. We had 14 people teaching social studies. That was a little too large a group to get anything done. I wanted to have everyone's voice at the table, but we couldn't even pick binders out, and get everyone to agree. So eventually we made it a smaller committee. So it's about bringing everyone at the table, but having it be manageable size. So in a small district like this, you want to make sure that everyone knows what their outcomes are at the end of the year, what they need to lead up to that next year. The state has provided us a roadmap with the curriculum frameworks, and this is what you teach in each grade. What I've seen to get even drilled down deeper when I was department head, we made pacing maps that these are the concepts we're going to teach in September, starting the year off with social, emotional, relationship building. So I'm a big fan of that. I don't think you need to jump right into that textbook the first day. Take some time to get to know those kids. The time you spend on those first few days, the first few weeks, getting to know each other and building routines and norms, you're going to capture that time tenfold as you go through the year, because your class is going to be more efficient. You're going to have less behavior issues. So you're not losing that time. You're capturing it back a lot more. So mapping it out, that the first few weeks we're going to do get to know each other activities, and then we'll jump into learning about, in my case, Revolutionary War. And then in October, we're going to move on to War of 1812. And these are the standards. These are the units from our textbook that relate to those standards. And it was not day to day, but it was in a general sense. By the end of October, you probably want to be here, because we've all been there, those of us who have taught, that you get to June and you got to, there's still a chapter you have to do. You sort of blow through it the last week. There's a great Simpsons line where the kids are filing out of school, throwing books and papers, and the teacher runs out, I didn't tell you how the war ended. We won! And the kids all cheer. So you don't want to end up with that. You don't want kids running out and not knowing who won World War I or World War II. So that's funny. I do a lot of Simpsons quotes. They seem to have covered everything in the last 30 years, at every possible scenario. So you want to get the people in the room who teach to know what they have to get through by the end of the year, and then a way to get there. So it's a little more mapped out and enumerated than just what the state gives us. I also think you want to look a little deeper into what skills, besides the curriculum frameworks, what skills you want them to have when they leave. Like at the end of 7th grade, they should know how to write a quality 5-paragraph essay, for example. And so the teachers below that know what the building blocks they need to have in place to get there, and the students, the teachers after 7th grade know when the kid comes to 8th grade, they know how to write a quality 5-paragraph essay. In 10th grade, it might be a research paper. So knowing those touchstones, those milestones in educational learning, whether it be a math concept or an ELA skill, to knowing when those touchstones are, so we know where we have to get them to. And also when you receive a group of students, you know clearly what they've learned and what they've done before you. It takes time, but I think if you have the documents there, you can drill down a little deeper than what the state gives us to what works for this district and get it mapped out. I think you're going to get a lot of results. You also want to get teachers talking as often as possible with the handoff of students. I found that very helpful. As a teacher, I would meet one day with the teachers. I taught 7th grade for most of my career. So one day we meet with the 6th grade teachers who are sending us the students. We would talk all about the kids and really get a deep dive and fill out paperwork that would help us schedule them. And then the next day in 7th grade, we meet with the 8th grade teachers that we were sending our kids to, have some casual discussions, but also fill out paperwork to help us schedule it. Were they on an IEP or a 504? Strengths, weaknesses, friends they should be with, kids they should not be scheduled with. Just getting that dialogue going, because you think how well you know your kids at the end of the year and how much you've learned about them, and then they go and the next teacher, you have to start all over again. So it's nice to have those dialogues that give you a head start. Like, this really works well with this kid. It looks like he's not getting it, but he is. You just ask him this question, and you'll see he doesn't get it. So some specific strategies I would say were curriculum mapping and pacing, having meetings for teachers to talk with other teachers and their subjects. When I was in Wilbraham Middle, we had a planning block we had got to add in with our new schedule that gave teachers a team planning block, and then one day a week, they can meet with the other teachers who teach that subject across the school. We got a lot of growth with our articulation from 6 to 8 out of those meetings. So finding the time, capturing the professional development time well, so it's purposeful and not thrown together. I think we've all been in those meetings, those of us who do this, that you can really be clear that the professional development snuck up on someone and they threw something together that morning. And we don't get a lot of time without the kids, and you want to make sure it's used well and pushing your goals forward.
Thank you. That concludes our prepared questions. I want to invite folks on the interview committee to ask any questions if they have them, and invite you as well. I'm going to start with you.
I don't have as many questions, but this is my second time meeting some of you, and I did a lot of research in the school. But I guess based on some of the questions we discussed today, what would your priorities be for next year? What are your goals and priorities for next year, starting with you and then those of you who work in the district, or parents or community members? What are you looking for to grow next year that was successful, or to try new? Because we're all sort of coming out of this pandemic with a fresh lens about what worked and what didn't work, and wanting to focus on the things that worked. So I'm just curious what your insights are.
Sure, I'll make it. Well, and thank you for referring to the profile of a candidate. And so folks at home, if you go to the principal search page, you'll see the profile of the candidate is there. It describes sort of what the ideal candidate might look like, attributes that they would have, and experiences that they would have. This is a district that is in transition and has had more than its share of administrative turnover. So we are seeking someone who can help bring long-term stability to the building and be a partner not only for the staff and students of the building, but also for district leadership, as the district figures out what it wants to be 5 and 10 years from now. So we are looking for someone that will always uphold the dignity of our staff and our students, who will seek to understand their experience, and to seek to understand their experience methodically and deeply. So that will mean multiple touches, multiple avenues of digging for how to understand what's happening. I'll stop there and ask other folks what, maybe Karen, if I could lean on you as a faculty member here.
Yeah, I guess as a faculty member, I've been here for 15 years, so I have seen multiple admin come through here. I think what I'd be looking for in an administrator next year was someone who just listened for a little while and took it all in before making too many changes. Because we've had so many changes in the last 7, 8 years that it makes it difficult to come to work sometimes. So, and just, and having an open door and always being there, you know, for the staff too.
I can relate. When I left Wilbraham Middle School in 2013, I think they've had 4 or 5 principals in that time that they've left. And my son goes there now, and I've talked to old friends of mine, old colleagues, and they just seem tired. They're just burnt out. It was a tough 3 years, but always having the new person that can come with their ideas and try to shake things up. And they're just getting tired. And the learning's still happening because they put their nose to the grindstone, but a lot of that fun has been driven out of it. It's just sort of, they feel more isolated.
Yeah, no, our teachers, we have a great school of teachers, and we are very connected with each other. We have, you know, there's not, niches or whatever, you know, like everyone gets along and has a great time and are supportive, and we're here for our community. So.
That's well said. Thank you.
Mom hat on. Here. So I have a daughter who's going to be 10th grader. So a lot of her beginning years of Pioneer were sort of robbed from COVID. And I have a son who's about to be a 7th grader, so new. And I think one of my aspirations and goals as a parent, looking through the eyes of both my kids, is for them to really make a connection with their school and feel proud of their school and wanting to come to school and feeling, that they're going to take something away from being at school, not just going through the motions of going through classes and things, that they get excited about what they learn here, what they experience in here is going to help them beyond that. So I'd say with a parent hat on, I think in 2 different ways, as a 7th grader and a 10th grader, that's kind of important.
I can relate. My daughter's gonna be in 10th grade and she's doing well, but I look at all the things that I'd say we got lucky because she does things landed the right way, like some of the friends she made before in the band that kept her steady through the pandemic, and she got some sort of self-motivation skills through my wife, so she did well. But I see a lot of my students I work with the last few years who are at the same age really struggle because they did lose a lot of time. And it was not just that, we all were so focused on the academic stuff, like the roadmap to success when we got back, but let's look at gaps, let's look at core standards, but we all sort of knew kids had missed out on things, but I think seeing the impact of that, all the social stuff, those quieter moments we're trying to be building out. Because my daughter doesn't feel as connected to her school in the middle school because she missed so much time. She's building that back up in the high school, but she left, she only had like a year and a half of middle school and sort of left there with she didn't get that really end strongly. So I'm seeing my son go through that now. He's having a better middle school experience. It's been not broken up. But we want to make sure we use the time we have left to really make those connections with them and give them experiences that are going to excite them for the classroom stuff and excite them to push through the harder stuff because they want to be here and they like it here. Same thing with staff. People want to come to work and be happy. It's just a tough job.
Actually, so as a school committee member, we have heard a lot about our declining population, and it's a big concern for us. And I feel, as a parent, I like that my kids go to a small school. I love living in a small town. We made a conscious choice to move here 4 years ago. And we love it here, but it's hard for small rural schools to really offer challenging programming and interesting, exciting opportunities, and you have to get really creative with the curriculum. So I think I think one of our challenges right now is it's finding ways to not make huge sweeping changes, but making very considered, careful changes that will bring that creativity and excitement into learning, exciting opportunities that'll benefit our community, but still give our kids a really strong foundation.
Doesn't have to be these big sweeping changes, but it's looking very closely at what's working and expand on that and a few little things here and there. I know we look at, my son's on an IEP for some learning disabilities, and a lot of times when you get a student who's in high school, they have this IEP that's like 12 pages long. Because every little thing that's worked through the years or what they thought might work is thrown into these accommodations. And I used to always say this phrase when I was principal in middle school, like, we need to prune the tree sometimes. They no longer need this. So like, not take away the whole plant, but just take a little nip here and there. Add something in new. Like, we moved last year, we're trying to get the outside of the house looking good. It had fallen into disrepair of the yard work. So my first instinct was to rip everything to start fresh. My mom, who's a gardener, said, no, you want to keep that one. That looks like a weed, but that's going to be a beautiful flower. So going at it with a little more purposeful, weeding in the right sense was helpful. But the same thing with schools or with an IEP. You want to look at it, what's the exact prescription that child needs to be successful? Let's take away this other noise. Same thing with a school. What's the exact prescription? I don't have all the ideas as a potential candidate. And everyone who works here doesn't have all the ideas, but together, if you're listening and looking at what's worked in the past, you come up with those creative little moments that really can make things work. And I've seen the things that we do in Ware with a little bit bigger school, but not much, and the opportunities the kids have. And there's things that I wish you have here that I wish we had there, like track and cross country. I think that's such a great experience, just as a small example, to get kids involved in a sport. You don't have to be playing since you were 5 to be successful at. We all know how to run, some better than others. So let's look at an example of that. But I think what's working and what's going to get you the biggest bang for your buck. There's no textbook or no like pre-made answer. You have to look at it. And I think the person who comes into this job, as you mentioned, I think it's going to have to do a lot of listening, just because we want to make the right choices.
I think that concludes our interview for this afternoon.
This was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I'll walk out with you. Committee, if you, maybe we'll decamp into the conference room over to talk, and, public, thank you for being here. If you want to leave your, yes, there you go too. Yes, I meant interview committee, not that. If you want to leave us your feedback forms, that would be great, and I'll walk out with Mr. Roy. And could I have somebody turn off the recording? Maybe.